Welcome back to the SportsMax Zone. We continue to talk football because 3 weeks before the start of the new Jamaica Premier League season, there continues to be changes to the coaching staff of teams. The latest being the sacking of Harold Thomas as head coach of Mount Pleasant Football Academy. Last season's beaten finalists, Thomas, who took over from Theodore Tapper Whitmore in June, has only been in charge of the St. Anne-based club for a solitary game, a 2-0 defeat to fellow JPL club Cavalier in the CONCACAF Caribbean Cup on Tuesday. Now, following Thomas's sacking, the news has come this afternoon that Theodore Whitmore is confirmed as the new coach. A press release saying that the club wishes to say effective immediately. Mount Pleasant has entrusted Theodore Tapper Whitmore with the job of building a technical team that will ensure Mount Pleasant continues to compete at the highest level. And the press release continues to say that owner Peter Gould takes this opportunity to apologize to the loyal Mount Pleasant fans for the decisions that were taken over the summer that adversely affected the performance of the team. We are committed to returning the club to a high standard of professionalism and look forward to the days ahead. That a press release in the past hour from Mount Pleasant Academy. Now, it is known that Davian Ferguson has been Theodore Whitmore's assistant at Mount Pleasant. He has since then taken up a job at Portmore United and has refuted claims that he is going back to the Mount Pleasant team. He said, quote, "I'm currently on my way to Portmore United's training now, so I don't know where they got that news from because I am contracted to Portmore United. And as far as I know, I'm still the coach of Portmore United." That comment would have been made several hours ago. JPL commentator Liz is still with us in the studio, and also joining us via Zoom to discuss the developing story is another JPL commentator, Dwight Jeremiah. Gentlemen, let's attack this story immediately. Let me say first of all, Dwight, that the quotes that we just presented from Davian Ferguson would have been maybe 6 or 7 hours ago, I'm not sure. But is there any chance that that story could advance from that position and Ferguson could go back to Mount Pleasant in spite of what he said to the reporter this morning?
And I think even at that point, if you really dissect that statement, there's everything in it that leaves it open. And my source, which has been good, this morning it's about 3 o'clock. I was awakened with a text message, and I feel confident that he will definitely join, from what I understand. And as he said, he's contracted to Portmore. That's the operative word, contracted to. And we know how these contracts go. They're just like players' contract. There's always a means to buy out that. And when it comes to buying something out, if there's one club that can do that, is Mount Pleasant. So I suspect that will take place, and I expect a reuniting with himself and Tapper at Mount Pleasant.
But is this overall story and how sudden it has been a bit startling, Dwight? I know you're a coach yourself, so you understand the role of a coach and sometimes how tenuous a coaching job can be. But the Mount Pleasant coaching job appears to be a very dicey job to hold.
It definitely is, and they did say the owner, Peter Gould, who is a big fan of Chelsea and was a good friend with the former owner, so maybe the model just fits in quite well with his friendship. No, I felt decisions were taken, and I was on this very space when it happened, when Tapper was removed, and a lot of talk was about the academic kids coming up to the first team. And I said, are we suggesting that Theodore Tapper Whitmore can't work with young talent? Since then, we've seen 10 new signings, despite 9 academy players have joined the first team. You still have 10 big name signings coming in, and I just felt it wasn't really a shift in that regard. Not really so much of a surprise. Both coaches on the divide now are good friends of mine. I have a good relationship with Thomas. Tapper and I, we spoke continuously. So when this happened, the big thing about it, though, Lance, is that this time around, the statement came from the owner, Peter Gould, and he was the one, my source told me, that was leading these talks with Theodore Tapper Whitmore. So I guess that's why he's a successful businessman, because he's one that doesn't wait around. If he makes a mistake, he's one that is going to go in and fix it immediately. And he felt it was a mistake, and he was the one leading the charge with the talks with Theodore Tapper-Whitmore.
Yeah, Dwight, before I get Leger in on the conversation, I just want to get from you, I think you started to answer it with your last response, but why has Harold Thomas been sacked as the Mount Pleasant head coach? It's been just one game, a 2-0 defeat to Cavalier in the CONCACAF Caribbean Cup, but it doesn't seem a large enough sample size for a man that you hired just 2 months ago.
No, I don't think so, in all fairness to Thomas, but I guess when you look at the big picture now and you say, okay, let's look at it and analyze it. I mean, Mount Pleasant, they lost the title, the Premier League title, on penalties. So it wasn't really a big gap between themselves and Cavalier. You shipped out a lot of players, 4 midfielders coming in, 4 defenders coming in, 2 strikers coming in. It's almost like a new look team. I don't think it was quite necessary for all of that to have taken place. And quite frankly, I think the owner believes that there has been a lot of rumbling from fans as well, unsettled with what has taken place. And I don't think that the model that they had promoted after the dismissal of Theodore Tapper-Whitmore was coming to the fore as well. So, I just feel like Peter Gould felt that it wasn't really going in that direction. And Theodore Tapper-Whitmore, he left it up to probably sporting directors and others to deal with it. He just feels that it's not a big shift, and Tapper has done a decent job, and maybe it's time for him to step in.
So just to summarize what I think you're saying, Dwight Jeremiah, is that the owner left it up to the sporting directors. They made a decision that he now does not agree with and has decided to pull out all the stops to reverse that decision.
Basically, yeah. I mean, if you summarize it that way, yeah. I mean, he's correcting what he felt, and as his statement said, apologizing to the fans. So definitely he felt the decision was not the way he wanted the club to go.
All right, let me get Leger Williams in on this conversation. Leger, of course, we spoke just earlier about Davian Ferguson, who was the assistant coach at Mount Pleasant. He's since moved on as the head coach of Portmore United. He is still the technical director of Manning Cup team Jamaica College. Do you suspect that Davian Ferguson will rejoin Theodore Tapper-Whitmore at Mount Pleasant? I know Dwight says that his source says that it is quite likely.
Well, my sources also indicate that that it's pretty likely, but does that make much sense from a Davian Ferguson perspective? I'm not quite sure. You have to think about the bigger picture. Now, what happens to the 4 or 5 players that joined Portmore United because of Davian Ferguson? You have to bear in mind that Ramon Howell left Mount Pleasant to go to Portmore to go with his coach, Davian Ferguson. We saw Romeo Guthrie as well go to Portmore United. It's rumored that Tyreek Zimenez, who is back in Jamaica, will be leaving Mount Pleasant to go to Portmore United. So where does that leave those players? Are those contracts going to be bought out and they're brought back to Mount Pleasant as well? And, Dwight mentioned that 10 new players were brought in. It's clear by the fact that certain players left Mount Pleasant to go elsewhere, even Demario Phillips going to Mobile United as well. So it's clear that certain players are that played the Tapper way, the Davian Ferguson way, have now left. So for the new players, what are we doing? Like, does that match up?
Yeah, very good questions there. Dwight Jeremiah, any insight into that aspect of the conversation?
In truth, you look at players that were there brought in by Theodore Whitmore, they're gone. These players that are here now were brought in by this setup being Harold Thomas and his crew. I mean, Tapper-Whitmore looks at it and thinks, okay, I still have the good players that were brought in. I still think that this is something I can work with and I can mold them into this. So, I mean, when Tapper left, this is what happened with coaches. The coaching merry-go-round took place where...
But Dwight, isn't that slightly different, though, from players leaving their former club to go to a new club because their coach has gone to that club, only for their coach to leave that club and go back where they were all coming from. So it's a slightly different situation from Tupper Whitmore being fired or being let go. I mean, whichever way you want to.
Yeah, but Ricardo, I'd say this to you. This morning I spoke to another Premier League coach who is elsewhere, and he's telling me he's working on bringing 2 players that he brought to the club he was to join him at the club he's at now. So it's not far-fetched to think that these players can be brought back if they so desire, or Ferguson can, move on and these players decide that, hey, I'm staying here now. I'm not going to go again because these movements I can't work with. But
more than anything else,
the initial talks with Peter Gull that Theodore Tupper Whitmore had late yesterday, it was on the back of him having conversations with Ferguson before entering that talk. That's my source. And it's a really good source. I'm confident that that was the case. And it's likely that if he's going to go, the big itch is there's a contract. You buy it out and I'll come.
For Davian Ferguson returning to Mount Pleasant as Tupper's assistant, would it be more than anything else a financial situation, meaning the type of salary that he will be looking at Mount Pleasant in comparison to the salary that he'll be receiving now at Portmore United?
I don't want to say it's all about the money, because persons at times as a coach, you want to have your own mandate, you want to break out and be that person. That's something that I'm not sure whether Ferguson is ready for or wanting that at this moment, and whether he feels the entire setup at Mount Pleasant is a good one for his coaching career as well. I'm not quite sure, but definitely there is more money to splash at Mount Pleasant. But if he does go back, I am not going to go on record to say it's all because of the money why he would go. But there's a lot of good things where Mount Pleasant is concerned. The fact, too, that they're also participating in the Caribbean Championship as well is another good platform for him to test his skills as well, so in an international way. So that could also be something that, is an encouraging factor for him to think about.
Yeah, and what's the word among the players, right? Because this, of course, affects them on a whole. You're watching your coach being dismissed, and you're watching your coach being rehired, and you're just looking on. And I'm not talking about the players that would have left. I'm talking now about the current Mount Pleasant players that are ready to go for the new season.
Well, they ask you as players, you're paid big bucks, and at this club you are paid big bucks. You're just expected to get on with it as professionals. Players come and go, coaches will come and go. You're expected to carry on, and that's what they're going to be expected to do. I mean, at the international level, we see that, maybe not with this back and forth as you see now, but at sometimes you see that too. But the players are always expected to just carry on with it. Yes, it can have an effect on some players who were brought in by this setup, and with new coaches coming in who didn't bring you there, then you feel like you're going to have to work twice as hard to really impress this coach. But that is the life of a footballer, and I guess they're going to have to just deal with it and roll their sleeve up. And there are good quality players that have come in, and Theodore Tupper Whitmore and his crew has looked at it and say, well, these are the players that we can work with at this moment, and I think it's a good fit. And maybe come January again, they'll look to add to it or ship out. It's just the life of football.
Okay, Dwight, thanks for linking with us on this story, a story that was pretty fluid today, and we await the prospects of Davian Ferguson giving up his head coaching job at Portmore to go back to Mount Pleasant as an assistant, which up to late yesterday he suggested that he could not verify that story, even though it was...
He's still contracted to Portmore, which is correct.
He's contracted to Portmore, so that is one piece of the puzzle that we'd have to see. And another thing I'd be looking out for is the relationship between Theodore Whitmore and Paul Christie when he gets back there, because we gather that Christie was the main person as a sporting director at Mount Pleasant that...
and the source says it's not really a good one at the moment.
that executed the non-renewal of his contract phase. So we'll see how that goes. Dwight, thanks for talking to us, and Liz, thanks for chipping in on the discussion as well. We go to break.
Yep, my pleasure, yeah.
Yeah, and we'll be back with more on The Zone after this.